to the Fantasy Footballers Dynasty Podcast with Borg, Betz, and a Baller.
Welcome on back. It's the middle of summer here. Fantasy Footballers Dynasty Podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Borganoni, and I'm joined once again by Matthew Betz.
And who else?
That's it.
Oh, okay, that's it. Sorry, guys. Turn off the show. Don't even bother. This one's going to be terrible. No. Corporate Kyle, they come and go as they please. I guess when you're up there with the suits and you're one of the bigwigs, you just do whatever you want. So they said, hey, Kyle, Betz, it's on you this week. So now I feel the pressure to deliver some of the best trade targets this show has ever seen. So hopefully we can do that today, but it should be a good episode, man. I'm excited to talk some football. We finally got some air quotes highlights on our timelines of minicamp OTAs. So it does kind of feel like the heat of the summer is here, and with training camps, not too far away. We're not that far away from football, man.
Two thoughts real quick. Andy, Mike, and Jason, only a couple times have actually seen them in suits over the years. Mike, it was like he was wearing the suits, but shorts with it just to be stylish. So it doesn't it doesn't happen much.
Right.
Doesn't happen much.
That was the all pink suit.
Yes, with Jared Goff.
My man was looking, I could not ever do that. So
yeah, pink suit for him. And then two, my favorite highlight that I want to point out that I've seen so far, which maybe that's my new thing, is my favorite, that doesn't mean anything highlight that I've seen, was Bo Melton,
the
wide receiver for the Packers. And yet the highlight was him. They were saying, hey, you know what? He's getting some run at cornerback today. We're going to see if maybe he could step in. Jair Alexander's out. And
wait. Is he trying to do the next Travis Hunter?
I think so. The Butterman we're big fans of. Actually, I have to say this on a per route basis, he's actually been pretty good so far in 2 years as a pro. But the highlight that they showed, the clip that was on my timeline that my algorithm apparently loved to see, was him trying to play cornerback but dropping the ball.
Oh, that's not a good look. What is it with Green Bay wide receivers, man? They can't catch up there.
There's a lot of things. Now they have too many of them. But yeah, Bo Melton, I feel like is trying to stake his claim as I belong on this team, because he's kind of just been fifth or sixth wide receiver on the team, and somebody's going to get cut. So he's basically trying to come up with a backup plan.
How can I stick around on this roster?
Can I be a cornerback? So on this episode, Betz and I are going to talk about a couple different players. We're going to play Dynasty, Hold'em or Fold'em. So a couple different players that we think for your rosters, they're ready to take off. So a couple of young players and rookie wide receiver I'm excited to talk about. So players that have some warning signs that we're saying you could trade them away because their cost doesn't quite match their future production. And then a couple of undervalued assets, players that we are targeting right now in Dynasty Leagues. So we'll talk about that. If you want all of the rankings, Dynasty rankings, rookie rankings, last week we did our startup mock, which a lot of the people, especially the YouTubers I hear, were pretty happy with everything that transpired last week, seeing the draft board, getting to tell people who was smart, who was dumb, your zero RB build. But we got to use the rankings, and then the people are still happy.
Yeah, it's always fun when we get to do those startup mocks, because you and I think even Jason, we talked before we hit record last week, we are super big believers in when you join a Dynasty league, you're committing. And so the leagues that we are in, we've been in them for a decent amount of time. It's been 5 years since I've actually done a real startup. So that exercise every year is super fun, because Dynasty startups are very, very fun to do. So yeah, man, it was good. If you missed it, go back and check it out. Shout out to the production team putting up the draft board, which a lot of you have requested. So, when you guys ask for it, eventually we bully the production team and we just make them do it.
Because you and I would have no idea how to do that.
That's correct.
Speaking of leagues that we are in, Dynasty leagues, the quick question I have for us today is, how many competitive teams are there in your Dynasty leagues currently? And you and I are in a couple together. I'm in a couple of Dynasty leagues with college friends. And then the follow-up is, what is the shelf life for a competitive team before they turn over and rebuild? Andy has famously been all in for almost the full life of the Ballers main Dynasty League, and he just started the process of rebuilding. But look at your leagues, Bex, and just tell me, like, how many competitive teams are there when you survey, like, going into 2025, like, oh, these are the teams that I'm marking out?
Yeah, I think generally speaking, there's like 4 every season when you get to this part of the calendar where, you have your rookie drafts, you have, not that there's really much value on the waiver wire, but the biggest names have been picked up. Like, you kind of know rosters are set, barring trades that you make in your leagues. There's usually like 4, I would say, that are like legit contenders. And there's like this kind of second tier where it's like, I could see the path if they get the right injury luck or they hit on a kind of sleeper rookie that they're counting on or something like that. You can see the path if they get the playoffs, they win a game or two and make a run. But really, I mean, most of my leagues kind of do follow this, like 3 or 4 at the top, 2 or 3 teams in the middle, and the rest are like, clearly you have a plan of this is not your year, but you're planning for the future.
Or they don't have a plan.
Or they don't have a plan and they just suck, which is currently your team in Dino Jr.
Whoa, dude.
Just zero plan. Oh, I love it. But generally, that it's a couple at the top. And I think that's right. Like, I think that's kind of how you should play. Like, the worst place you can be is smack dab in the middle, where it's like you're good enough to kind of always stay relevant, but you're not good enough to land a Neighbors, a Genty, or someone like that in your rookie draft because you're not picking high enough. So yeah, it's generally like 4 teams maybe, I would say, and I think that's most of the leagues that I'm in. That's kind of what it's at.
Yeah, and I found that for a lot of those teams that are, there's 3 or 4 competitive teams, they have a shelf life of 3 to 4 years because a lot of people identify them in that league, and so the assets in the league kind of get divided up that way. Like, okay, well, these teams are trying to acquire picks. And so they're grabbing veterans that they can kind of use for 2 to 3 years, and they're kind of turning that over. Like, I was helping out a Dynasty team, Al Borland, one of our producers. So really great producer. Wasn't great at Dynasty. I'll just be honest. And so I came in as a GM and said, hey, 6th, 7th place isn't going to cut it, buddy. And yet we're not really helping ourselves turn over. So eventually we got to the place where we did get to go in that lower tertile of the league and say, hey, you know what would it look like for us to rebuild? Now we're actually buying veterans. And I think that is one of the key things when you look at your leagues and you're identifying where people are, if they're competitive or not, is who is willing to buy veterans at the trade deadline or in the offseason because they're saying, I'm making a run. So I don't love giving up first round picks for these veterans, but I'm willing to squeeze out the value of players like Alvin Kamara, who in a startup, nobody wants to take him, but he's going to be a solid RB2 for your team. So we figured out a way to trade with Andy to give him some seconds for a package instead of just, paying top tier. But that's kind of the biggest thing for me is just looking at the leagues and kind of separating them out. And you can do that right now. Like, this is the perfect time in June to look at your league, look at everybody's assets. And then as you get closer to the season and the trade deadline, you can see like, hey, this team, I think they would be willing, or at least they fit the type of team I could trade for a running back. And that's what you're kind of giving yourself a list to work from.
Right. And I think it kind of makes trading easy when you can do that. Like, when you identify wherever your team is at in that kind of arbitrary ranking of how you feel like, contender to rebuild, wherever you are in that range, like, pick somebody that's kind of on the opposite side. And it's kind of easy to get deals done that way, easier, where if you're a contender and somebody else is a rebuilder, you're willing to send out a first round pick or, a couple seconds or whatever, and they've got a valuable veteran that is not super helpful to what they're doing right now, but you could use that guy. It makes it easy to find a trade partner in your league, I think. So being able to do that and kind of identify the right matches in that scenario can help get some deals done, in the offseason.
So like, you or I are in a league together, Dino Jr., which we talk about a lot with Jason and Mike here. And I would say your team is on the fringe of being like one of those contenders, like top 4 teams. I don't think you're one of those teams right now.
Okay.
I also worry about, a team like yours. What are you going to be in 2 to 3 years from now?
Yeah, this is it's now or never. So I'm going to probably need to workshop a couple things and maybe go get 1 or 2 more pieces. But I definitely think that this team is like, if for some reason I get off to a good, not great start, I will probably be a seller midseason. It's a team it's super top heavy. It's got Jalen Hurts, who's obviously great, but at wide receiver, it's like Debo, DeVonta Smith, got Jacoby Myers, Kittle. So
flex.
Like Kittle, James Cook. Like, it's a good roster, but it's not incredible, I would say. So I definitely can make the playoffs, and finished 5th, but who cares about that? So depending on what happens early in the year, I might be a seller on that league. We'll see.
I surveyed my four leagues I care about most in Dynasty, and I was looking at what the playoff picture was and who won, and only in one of those leagues did the number 1 seed win, and the 6 seed won, the 4 seed won, 3, like, it wasn't always the team that I went into the season thinking like this is the top tier team. So making the playoffs in Dynasty is really like all you're really asking for, and then you can kind of go all in, like you said, at the trade deadline. But it is nice if you are one of those teams that's rebuilding, and maybe you are somebody that has 10 leagues, and you're like, I'm rebuilding in 2 or 3 of them, and then I'm a middle of the road team. But if you are rebuilding and you start to acquire players, there will be people that, at some point know like, hey, you need picks. I see this player. This could be a player that you want. So just make sure you mix and match and understand what everybody is in your league. Let's jump right in.
Hold 'em or fold 'em.
Betz, the hold 'em or fold 'em drop. One that the footballers have not used since 2020.
Who could forget? I did.
I think a lot of people did. 2019, the Ballers did a live show in New York City. They used this drop. And apparently it's just been in the archives, completely lost. And I found it, and I wanted to make sure that it was still used.
I mean, this is a great show for it, so let's do it.
Betz and I are going to talk about a couple different players, but before we talk about these categories, at this point in the offseason, I'm working on an article right now where I'm talking about dynasty trade windows and trying to assess like the different months, which players or which picks have more value based on the NFL calendar. The craziest thing that I tell people all the time when they ask about my job is they say, hey, what do you guys do in the offseason? And then I think about this podcast and the people that listen and the people in our Discord. I'm like, dude, we're always talking stuff like all year round. There's enough to talk about, but there are different points of the season where the NFL is just a juggernaut. I mean, Roger Goodell can get up on a podium, read names, and we're like, that's awesome. That's I want to tune into that. Or it's March and free agency changes the value of a dynasty player. So there are different windows of value for players, and then your league's trade deadline is definitely one of those points in dynasty where you say, okay, this is a big point. If I'm going to extract value or if I'm going to trade for picks, this is when I'm going to do it. But in your mind, what makes somebody a good trade target that you want to say, like, I'm going to go for?
Yeah, I think there's a few things that you could think of. Like, I mean, one is you think there's a mismatch in value, whether you have a guy valued higher or our rankings or whatever, then the market suggests. And generally speaking, like I'm using startup ADP to kind of gauge the market. But for me, the best thing to kind of give you an idea of when somebody is a good trade target or if they are a good trade target is matching the player to the time of year, like you talked about with the NFL calendar, where like certain players will have a lot more value in August and September as we get close to the season and there's optimism around a situation or a player. Other guys are good trade targets when, middle of the season, they're veterans and you're in a rebuild. And it's like, man, somebody could really use this Jacoby Myers wide receiver 2 value, but you're looking forward a year or two knowing his contract situation, things like that. We also talk about every year this kind of cyclical pattern where like you get to August, September, October, those rookie picks obviously still hold value, but they're not as valuable as they're going to be when you get to February, March, April, and everything in the NFL calendar is NFL draft rookie focused. So being able to kind of understand where the ebbs and flows are in the value for those certain assets, I think is really, really important to make sure that you know that the players that you're targeting in a trade target for or away match the time at which you're kind of trying to do that, if that makes sense. Like in, February and March, like nobody's trading for, I don't know, nobody's excited to trade for Joe Mixon. But like if we get to week 4, week 5 and Mixon is carrying the ball 20 times a game and Houston's a pretty good offense, like somebody in your league is going to want Joe Mixon, right? So just make sure that you're kind of matching the trade timing to the player archetype.
For sure. Like I just, I put Nick Chubb on the block in one of my leagues immediately when he signed with the Texans.
Literally anytime there's news on your player, especially if you're trying to trade them away, like that's the perfect time to do it. Just capitalize on the what if.
Right. So, and I have a league with a bunch of Georgia fans, so Nick Chubb carries a little bit more gravitas there than other places. But For players like Mixon or Chubb who are veterans, it's like either it's the news thing now or it is that point in October where, the players kind of skyrockets in value. It's just about small edges for me. I think a lot of times we're searching for the trade where I'm just blowing somebody out of the water, but I find that most people in Dynasty leagues, the leagues that I play in, they're not stupid. And I wrote down, okay, there's maybe one guy in my league that might be stupid. I do have a couple of people in my leagues that just love trading. I'm in leagues where people trade a lot, and I know for some people that doesn't happen a lot, but it's starting conversations with those types of people and being aggressive, maybe not too aggressive, but being aggressive with your first offer. We have some trade articles on our site that talk about how do you negotiate, and some of it goes through the psychology of it. But if you think a player is somewhere between he's more than a first-round pick, but I don't really know what else it could be, start the conversation at 2 first-round picks, and the person's probably going to come back and say, whoa, that's too much. You're like, okay, well, let's find a middle ground for this player to see where he's at. But you're starting the conversation, you're starting the trade, engaging where you think it is. I think trade values and trade calculators are fine as a 4th, 5th thing if you want to check it. But for the most part, Dynasty values are kind of arbitrary. I think that Jack Besh is going to be good, but I don't know for certain what his value is in year 1, much less year 2, 3, 4. And I'm not going to just say this is exactly what it is and be dogmatic about it. So I think at the end of the day, I'm trying to find a range of what a player's worth. Maybe I overpaid a little bit. That's great. Maybe I underpaid. I don't know how much Jack Besh is actually worth right now. You can look at a rankings chart. You can look at our startup rankings. It's a starting point. But if I were to ask you right now, how much is Jack Besh worth? You're like, I don't know. I took him in the 2nd round in my rookie draft. That's the starting place, but we don't know.
Well, I mean, the man is already getting fitted for his gold jacket. So
that's true.
I think we do know. But yeah, I think that's a good point. And the other thing too about some of these kind of trade charts that you use or calculators or rankings, even our rankings, right? You go back a year or 2 years and they are just vastly different than what they are now. So Dynasty value changes super, super quickly. So if you feel good about the trade and somebody in your league feels good about the trade and you, in the public perception is you lost, quote unquote, by a little, we don't really know. So if it makes your team better, and as long as you're not being silly with your trades, I'm not saying go crazy, but Dynasty is more fun when trades happen, and people that are way too rigid on, I don't know, man, you got to throw in this extra 3rd or this extra 4th to get this deal done. That kind of stuff gets old over time, and that's when people are I don't have time for this. I don't want to worry about that. So then trades don't get done in your league. So don't be afraid to pay a fair cost, which sounds crazy. People are always trying to win the trade. If it makes your team better, just do it.
One of the things that I do on the back end is I track Dynasty values of players, not as a finite point. He is the wide receiver 36. One of the players we're about to talk about in a second. He's the wide receiver 36 on one site. And I go, okay, I get why he's there. But as you draft more and more, and as you look at rankings more and more, it kind of creates this confirmation bias of that's just where this player goes. If you play best ball, which Betz and I talk about a lot on the DFS and betting podcast, you kind of get used to where players are. And even if you don't like certain players, you're lower on them than average consensus, then it's still something that you're weighing of just he's still around RB, 16. And that just kind of weighs on you. But when you track over the years, like Betz mentioned, I don't think we realize how off we all are on players' values over multiple years. So even when we talk about some of these young players, so many of the day 2 wide receivers, and there's a lot of them this year that we're excited about, Kyle Williams, Jack Besh, Jayden Higgins, all these guys. It's I want to say that they're all going to be good, but I know for a fact we're going to be wildly off on some of these players. The Jalen Polks, that was okay, well, he's a day 2 wide receiver. And now, if I offered you a bag of beans, would you take it for Jalen Polk?
Honestly, yeah, probably.
Dude, you have no idea. This bag of beans could be awesome.
Send it over, buddy.
All right, let's take a quick break and we'll talk about some of these players. All right, the first category we're going to talk about today for Dynasty players is the ready to take off. This player is somebody that you're saying when you're building in your valuations that their value will skyrocket a year from now. So I'm going to let you start us off because this actually takes it doesn't take a wild leap of faith, but there is a lot of unknowns with this player.
Yeah, and I got to give you some credit last year. I think we talked about this like entering the season. Your kind of bold prediction for this player was that he is going to be a top, if I recall correctly, top 10 dynasty tight end in the next year, basically. And you weren't saying that Mark Andrews had to get hurt for it to happen. You were saying likely just going to overtake Mark Andrews in a matter of time. And we kind of saw that last year in certain moments of the season. Now, Isaiah Likely is 25 years old. He's been in the league for a while. He's in his contract year from his rookie deal. So he's been in the league for 4 years, or will be for 4 years. But Mark Andrews, it seems very clear that this is kind of the last go around, unless he agrees to take like a huge pay cut for next year. There was already some of the trade conversations earlier in this offseason, or do they move on? Obviously, now we know time has passed. They picked up his bonus for this year for the roster bonus. He's on the team. He's going to kind of have his role. But when you look at some of the other moves that Baltimore has made with their roster, recently signing Rashad Bateman to a pretty lucrative 3-year deal. Lamar is due for another contract extension. It's crazy to say that already, but due for another one probably in the next 2 years-ish. Zay Flowers is going to need another deal if they want to keep him around. On defense, Kyle Hamilton is going to require a ton of money. So like when they're kind of planning out their salary cap for the next 2, maybe 3 years in Baltimore, and you think about which tight end is it going to be cheaper to re-sign, certainly it's going to be Isaiah Likely. And I think that they're going to be able to do that and let Mark Andrews walk in this coming offseason. So my take on Isaiah Likely is we've already seen him on the NFL field. We know he is good and capable. And when Mark Andrews has been off the field, he's been very, very productive for fantasy. 9 games since he entered the NFL without Mark Andrews, he's averaged 12.5 PPR points per game. I mean, that's a small sample, but it's not nothing. And it's an offense that obviously you want pieces of. So right now, he does not look like the starter in Baltimore. But I do believe a world exists where this season he actually does overtake Mark Andrews, not just in the routes department, but like playing time, all those things, and production. And you start to see this kind of planning for the future aspect in Baltimore, where Likely is the guy next year and Andrews is gone. And just for reference on Mark Andrews, he has seen a dip in his routes per game in 3 straight years. He's also seen a dip in his efficiency as far as his targets and yards per route run in 3 straight years. So I don't know how much of that was due to the injury recovery from last season or just age or a combination. Hard to say, but I think based off this team's kind of cap situation, Likely is not to be silly here, more likely to be their guy next year than Mark Andrews. So I'm trying to trade for him right now before we all know that information, basically in 6 months.
Yeah, right now on Keep Trade Cut, which we use a lot of times as a crowdsourced website that allows you to, as if you haven't done it yet, just to kind of see where people are, where the current sentiment is. It is not perfect. The values are not year to year stable, but it is a great thing for me to check, and also to check like, okay, well, somebody in my league is viewing him this way. So he's the tight end 9, which is higher than I would have thought, but you start to get down the list of tight ends and it gets kind of bleak once you get, a little bit further on. So would you rather have Isaiah Likely moving forward or Kyle Pitts?
Oh, Likely. I can't do the Kyle Pitts thing anymore. It's just, it hurts, man. It's so frustrating. I do think that Kyle Pitts could eventually be like a fine second contract guy. Like, I just think he and Atlanta it's over. But with Likely, like, I think you're getting that continuity. Todd Monken's offense has always prioritized tight ends as well. Lamar is playing great football. Like, I think you bet on the known situation of Likely, at least call your shot and say he's their guy next year.
Yeah, I was trying to think out different scenarios with Likely of, okay, he re-signs with Baltimore and he's the dude. Like, his value is going to be at a place where it's rock solid as a tight end 1 for fantasy. Let's say they don't re-sign him. Okay, he goes somewhere else and they pay up with a free agent deal for him to be the dude. People are going to be excited. They're like, oh, this team really likes him. They paid the money for it. The other scenario is, let's say he gets hurt, which can happen, and you're like, man, he gets a short-term deal. He comes back to Baltimore, whatever. He's still so young that when we look at the life cycle of Dynasty tight ends, which we have a full article if you want to find that in the Dynasty Pass, 25, 26 is kind of where you see a large majority of breakouts. And then you still see them age well into, 27, 28, 29 seasons. So there's a lot of life here for a guy that feels like he has a ton of miles left on the tires.
Yep, I think that's a great way to put it. So yeah, I'm trying to trade for Isaac Likely right now. What do you think, like in terms of like rookie picks, it would take to get him? Would you say like a second is enough?
Yeah, I mean, obviously we're not trading a first, even in a tight end premium league. I'm not doing that, but I think you can get it done for a second, and maybe, yeah, you're kind of playing a little bit with fire here because somebody knows, like they're not stupid that like, oh, he's been good when Andrews hasn't, but I don't think people realize it's not just tied to Andrews. Like he's a player beyond this year. So I think a second could at least get the conversation going, and maybe it's a second and like something else, but you're not paying for him to be your tight end one right now.
Right. It's more of a move. I do think it's possible that he has a situation this year where it plays out where he does overtake Andrews, but I really think the odds on bet here is you're trading for him now before you see a spike in his value in the offseason is kind of what I'm saying.
All right, I want to bring up a rookie wide receiver that I liked in the pre-draft process. I just liked his teammate more. And so whenever you have that, when you're watching college film, it's very easy to bring in some bias. So Jayden Higgins, wide receiver for the Houston Texans, they took him 34th overall. And Jalen Noel, his team at Iowa State, also they took in the third round. And I went back through. Since 2015, there's been a lot of college teammates drafted on day one or day two from the same college. This is the first one where they're on the same team in the NFL. There were some other cases where Quentin Johnston and Darius Davis got drafted by the Chargers, but that was later on. But what's interesting is when you look at Jayden Higgins and you kind of assess his film, I went back and watched all the targets from this past year. You have to also bring in the context that Noel was really, really good. Like I loved his film. A lot of the comps we were given is like, this is a Amon-Ra-like player in the slot, where he's more than just like, oh, you're just going to run. There's Josh Downs in the slot, who we like Josh Downs a lot, but then there's Amon-Ra, who can be a red zone presence and just do more stuff down the field. I think Noel's that guy. Higgins, I think, gets typecasted as just being a tall, contested catch wide receiver, and the film says that he's just very different. He's all three levels of the field. He's somebody that I found I liked more and more. 6'4", 215. He ran a 4.47. He is Michael Pittman if Michael Pittman had a little bit more giddy up. That was my like notes for him. It was like, I've always loved Pity City. He's not the fastest guy in the world. It's kind of actually painful to watch some Pity City highlights where you're just like, okay, he's open, but he wasn't very fast getting there. But Jayden Higgins, his 29% targets per route run, only Trey Harris was better among wide receivers drafted on day one and day two. And they are saying this guy's going to start from day one. So my first thing I want to bring up is, do you feel like a year from now, he's going to be more valuable than he is now? He's wide receiver 36 on Keep Trade Cut.
Yeah, I actually think both guys, both Iowa State rookies.
I wanted to say that, but I'm a little biased towards Noel.
Well, when I look at the depth chart, right, like Nico is his own thing. He's the alpha. It's his team. But behind him right now, I think the short-term plan obviously is Christian Kirk in the slot. They were going to potentially get him on free agency. They ended up having to do a quick trade for him. They picked up this roster bonus for this year. So like he's on the team and he's making a decent amount of money. I think it's north of like 16 million, something like that off the top of my head. So he is being paid like a true starter in this offense. So when I think about kind of the two Iowa State guys, like the three wide receiver set on paper, at least entering the season, should be Nico on one side, Higgins on the other, and Christian Kirk in the slot for this year. Maybe Kirk performs incredibly well and they get him back on a cheap 1 or 2 year deal in the offseason or something like that. But with the draft picks that they made, they're sort of telling us with their moves kind of what they're thinking about, whether it's Tank Dell's health, unfortunately, taking a turn for the worst here, or just saying, look, Kirk for us is kind of a 1 year rental. Jalen Noel is going to be our slot wide receiver in 2026. That's kind of how I'm projecting it. So if you think that CJ Stroud and the Houston Texans offense can improve this year and bounce back to what we saw at points during his rookie season, then I think both guys are going to take off in the offseason from their value. Higgins has the opportunity to do it this year. So if he steps on the field and he is wildly disappointing, maybe in the offseason, there's going to be talks of, he only averaged, 1.3 yards per route run or whatever the talk is going to be if he disappoints.
Whatever the stupid route metrics people like me bring up.
Every time. If he disappoints, there's a world where maybe he doesn't take off. But at least from like you can see the future standpoint of what the depth chart is going to be in 2026, I think both Iowa State guys are good candidates to gain value over the next 6 months into February of next year when we look at the offseason. So yeah, I like both guys. I'm with you. I like Noel quite a bit. We should listen when the NFL tells us what they think of certain players and they draft them way earlier. Higgins' draft capital was legit, and obviously there's a plan here. So I'm buying both guys, but to me, kind of the cheaper, like sneakier option is Noel, but because everyone knows Higgins is going to be a starter right away.
Man, I love Noel. I want him to be great so bad. It's always funny when we sort through all of our data post NFL draft, and there are certain teams that like draft, like, the Eagles have always drafted Georgia players because they're smart and they're good, but they're like, Georgia teammates. Whenever I see teammates, college teammates that end up on the same team, I'm always like, are they actually friends? Do they like see each other? Like, man, I don't want to see that guy again. But Higgins and Noel, Jayden and Jalen, actually have did a deep dive. They have a fishing TikTok channel. J&J Fishing, where they're just out fishing together and they record it.
Are you on the TikTok?
I am not. I did a little research and I found the link though.
Okay. Do you want to share it for the people and maybe get a little sponsorship deal or what?
We want to get sponsored by their fishing TikTok?
Yeah, TikTok's where it's at, dude. That's what they're telling me. That's what the kids are saying.
That's where the clicks are going? Yeah.
Yeah.
But J&J Fishing is what I found. Let me get your thoughts though on the Texans offense before we move forward. Because our boy Bobby Slowick, my man, my former colleague that I always joke about. Bobby Slowick, they were really, really bad. They were really bad on second down last year. But here's one of the crazy stats I found about their offense is they used the 10th highest percentage of pre-snap motion in the NFL last year. It was on 60% of the dropbacks. And yet, when they used motion, they were 28th against man and 25th in fantasy points per dropback against zone. They were bad. They used it a lot, and they were one of the worst in the league at doing it. Part of that is not having the weapons available towards the end of the year with all the injuries, and Dalton Schultz is like, when Dalton Schultz is in motion, you're in trouble because he's not going too fast. Now they actually have the pieces in place, and a lot of the routes that I really liked with Higgins wasn't just the deep stuff because he could get behind the defense. It was like they put him in motion, and he's running slants. And that was one of the progressions we saw with Nico, where Nico wasn't just this big body down the field stuff. It was the intermediate stuff that really mattered. So do you feel like this Texans offense, passing offense, we'll say, is one that like you just want to buy in now because everybody besides Nico is not that expensive?
Yeah, I think you're getting a little buying opportunity based off of the disappointment of last year. And we've talked about that on the show a lot, where it's like after the rookie season, everybody anointed CJ Stroud as the next, Joe Burrow is kind of what people have thrown out of like the next incredible rookie quarterback to come out. And he did have an incredible rookie season. But the problem with kind of what happened last year is the scheme did not insulate him from a sophomore slump, if that makes sense, where it was kind of a perfect storm. Like the scheme wasn't great. The offensive line was terrible. And they've talked about it now in the offseason. CJ Stroud has kind of come out and said, like, I have more control at the line right now. And with Bobby Slowick, he had almost no control at the line. It was like, we're calling the play. Here's what it's going to be and adjust after the snap. And that's a lot to ask on a young quarterback with a really bad offensive line. So the offensive line is still a question mark, but I think you'll see Stroud have more control at the line, audible, certain checks, stuff like that, to give him more autonomy as the quarterback. And if that can happen and they can kind of mask the offensive line issues with a good scheme and hopefully better weapons, like if Jalen Noel and Kirk and Higgins are even just like average NFL talents at this point, it's way, way, way better than what they had at the second half of last year when they had the ghost of Robert Woods and Xavier Hutchinson and Deontay Johnson for like a week out there running routes. Like they really didn't have weapons outside of Nico. I remember Nico missed a chunk of time with his hamstring too. So it was just a perfect storm to kind of be a disaster last year. Obviously in hindsight, easy to say, but I do think in the Dynasty trade market, there's an opportunity here to capitalize because to me, Stroud is not as bad as what he was last year. I'm not sure he is what he was as a rookie, but definitely I think there's an opportunity here.
Yeah, I was going through the valuation process for Higgins because you could take him in your rookie drafts if you haven't yet, but like in the early to mid second round. Like he's available 202 through 207. Like you could probably find him there in a one quarterback rookie draft. I feel like next year his valuation is either going to stay the same or it's going to be more expensive. Like it's going to cost you a late first or maybe even more if he does hit and this offense can sustain multiple wide receivers. Like you can look at Nico and just say, oh, Nico's going to ball out, but it doesn't mean that there's not room for another wide receiver. We've seen Tank Dell be just as good a running mate. And we saw Stephon Diggs be a top 12 wide receiver last year alongside Nico. So, there's room for more than one person here. And so I would say both Iowa State wide receivers, but I wanted to highlight Higgins just going back through his film because I feel like there's more there than just being a contested catch guy. All right, let's change gears here because we were talking really positive things. Now let's talk about some players that there are some warning signs. And what you're saying here is not trade away this player immediately for beans. You're saying the cost right now of what it would be in a startup doesn't really match maybe what the future production is going to be. Or I have some worries about this player moving forward. So you go first.
Do you have the drop?
I need to look for it. It's just sad, so I don't even know if I do anymore.
We built this city.
Do you have the sad drop?
No.
Oh, okay. Because that's what I would like you to hit. Look, Michael Pittman is a solid NFL wide receiver. But when he had those really, really good years for fantasy, even just 2 years ago in 2022, looking at his numbers, he was just an absolute target machine. So I think that he is a good, not great NFL talent. And so for me, when I look at kind of where he's going in startups right now on my fantasy leagues, ADP, it's kind of right around pick 90. It's not super expensive, but it's not cheap either. But when you look at the kind of overall context of the team and the player, they're sort of at a crossroads, right? Like the Colts, this is kind of a make or break year for Shane Steichen, for the GM, for obviously Anthony Richardson, who's now dealing with another shoulder injury, for Daniel Jones. Like there's just a lot of ways where this goes okay and everybody keeps their jobs and it's fine, or goes south really, really quick. I don't really know the outcome that's definitely going to be, but I think when you're looking at how this team is building and you're looking at what could happen over the next year, year and a half, 2 years, Michael Pittman is already set to play his age 20 season this year, which is kind of crazy because he's only been in the league for 5 years, but he has this year and next year under contract with the Colts. If Richardson can't get his career back on track because of injury or poor play or a combination of the two, and Daniel Jones is not it, but like plays good enough to keep the starting job the year after, and this team is kind of stuck in no man's land where they're not high enough in the NFL draft to get a legit quarterback prospect, and they have to sign Daniel Jones to, one of these kind of middling starter deals for a year or two, then all of a sudden you kind of have this situation where like Michael Pittman is kind of stuck in no man's land that I could see a path where he's like fine for fantasy, but never really going to be a difference maker again. It's kind of how I'm feeling about him. And at a top 90 pick, you're kind of still counting on maybe like what we thought of him a couple years ago. And you also have to throw in the fact that this team just drafted Tyler Warren in the first round. You and I are big fans of Tyler Warren. We think he's a very good football player. I don't know, man. It just kind of feels like we're not really factoring in the decline that could happen with this offense and with his role in the offense specifically. So for me, those kind of factors, also looking at, a back injury that people were talking about last year, like is this going to require surgery or not? So you've got some injury concerns with Pittman as well. There's just a lot of ways where I think a year from now, we're kind of like drafting Michael Pittman in, I don't know, the 120s, 130s of startups, and his value just kind of slowly slides year over year over year.
Yeah, and I think it's sad when you look at how, because he's lived off volume and because the touchdowns have just never been there, it's like he missed the window. He missed the window to be one of those players to get 8, 9, 10 touchdowns because he's just in the wrong environment. He also claims that he's the best fisherman in the NFL. Going back to my first argument, talking about fishing teammates, I wonder if that's just what he wants to end up doing, man. Just fish.
Why do you have so much information on fishermen in the NFL right now?
Well, there's a lot of stuff out there. We just happen to pick a couple players that are really into it. And the thing about Michael Pittman is I feel like he's just going to be like, sweet, I did my thing. I'm retiring early, got the second contract, and in like 2 years, it's irrelevant.
Yeah, I mean, think about too, just like dynasty players, like on the top level down. Whenever we start to see the age 29 or 30 next to a player, even if they're like an elite asset, like Devonta Adams for a couple years there was like 29, 30. I don't know, man. Like maybe he starts to fall off. Julio Jones back in the day, like, I don't know, man. He's 30 now. Like Michael Pittman, no disrespect, is not those guys, right? So like when we start to see 29 next to Michael Pittman's name or 30, his value in trade markets, I feel like, is going to be next to nothing. So again, he's set to play his, age 27, turning 28 later this year season. Only has 2 more years on his current deal. Like I feel like things are only going to trend south. And it's not that he won't provide value for a certain team in your league right now, but it's more of a flex type value for me. And I can't see much beyond that. So that's why I'm saying, like, right now, if there is somebody who kind of still remembers the value of a couple years ago, or the name value, or likes the fun Pity City drop, might not be a bad time to float him out there in a trade.
Yeah, it's tough to feel like you're going to get top end value right now. It does help that, like, when people consider this team, they don't consider A.D. Mitchell being somebody that's going to break through in year 2. And yet, like, he's going to be around. Alec Pierce at the end of his contract. So there is, like, if you're looking at dynasty windows of this team, I feel like there's still some life left if people can, like, squint and see it. And if there's news that, like, Daniel Jones and him have a rapport or whatever, but just the injury stuff is it feels like it's just never going to go away. And I'm not the injury guy to be able to talk about it, but he does feel like a player to me that when I look at him and I'm comparing different players, I'm like, is his back just going to be like this? It's like we look at Stafford and just say his back is just screwed forever.
Yeah. I mean, it's like I said, there was a point last year where they were talking about IR and surgery, and he just kind of battled through it. So there's a chance that he gets through the season and he's fine, but there's also a pretty good chance it comes back up. So yeah, I think the time is now, I would say.
All right, I want to bring up another player who is a little bit older. In fact, they're just a little bit older than Pity City, and it's TJ Hockenson, who's about to turn 28 years old. He's technically still in his prime. If I was just saying life cycle for a tight end, he has 3 more years under contract. And what's funny is that I wrote this in there before we got news of a Josh Oliver extension, which shouldn't drastically change everything. I did think it was interesting. He got a good amount of guaranteed money to, like, Josh Oliver's made a ton of money in the NFL.
Shout out to you, Josh Oliver. Good for you.
And his agent.
And his agent.
But TJ Hockenson last year, he returned in week 9. He was recovering from his torn ACL. He sadly became one of 5 tight ends over the last decade who saw 60 targets in a season and didn't score a touchdown. So I don't know how. Didn't score a touchdown. The weirdest thing about Hockenson, when I'm going through and all the different ways that he's used, is that he's not like the type of tight end where you're seeing an elite number of slot snaps. Like that's how Kelsey was used. That's how Dalton Kincaid, those kind of guys are used. He's mostly lined up in line. And it's like a large amount of his snaps, like 60+% in line. And then you look at the type of routes that he gets. He doesn't get a lot of the short routes that, like, a lot of them are layup throws that you want to pad your PPR stats. So didn't see much screen work. Only 7.7% of his routes were flats, where the NFL tight end average is 16%. It's actually like a lot more down the field stuff, which you might think is really, really great. The problem is the other 2 main pass catchers on the team, Addison and Jefferson, are just light years ahead of him in terms of being down the field guys that we really care about for fantasy. I worry with TJ Hockenson that when you look at a tight end dynasty rankings list and you're looking at startups and you go, okay, here's all the guys that I think I want. Like, obviously I want Bowers, McBride, Laporta's next. Then it's the young guys, Loveland, Warren, Kittle. I feel like there's just this massive gap between what I would pay for TJ Hockenson and those elite guys. And yet he's being lumped as like tight end 6, tight end 7 on a lot of sites, where I just see this massive gap. So if you're in a tight end premium league and you're just drafting straight from tight end ranks, you're gonna be like, who's the next tight end up on the board? It's TJ Hockenson, where for most of his career, he's kind of had spurts where he was really, really good with the target share, but last year was just 18%. And if you look in games without Jefferson, all of his stats are ballooned. Over the last 2 years, 30% target share when Jefferson's out, only 19% when he's in there. And I just worry, is he just always going to be a guy that ends up at like 18%, 19%? And yet you're having to pay in some of these leagues like a pretty premium price. Tight end 6 and 7 is not cheap in startups.
Yeah, that's the issue. It's like Hockenson is probably fine for the next couple of years in Minnesota, but generally speaking, like a fine tight end doesn't really help win you your league. So he's kind of this like tight end dead zone type of guy where it's like, I see the path where he has value for a roster, and obviously you feel comfortable with him in your starting lineup, but like his ability to match, over the past couple of years, Kelsey, or match this year and moving forward, maybe like McBride and Bowers, that is a really, really tough scenario to see playing out. So I'd much rather pay the cost of an elite guy or just not pay the cost of TJ Hockenson and kind of get like upside swings around him or a little bit later in startup. So yeah, I think he's fine. I kind of go back and forth where it's like, I really love this offense. I love Kevin O'Connell. I think the quarterback play is going to be really good with JJ McCarthy because Kevin O'Connell just kind of does that with his schemes and, got Sam Darnold back on track, and it's very quarterback friendly. So I think McCarthy is going to have to fall on his face for this kind of to fall apart. But there is a world that exists, even though I'm a huge McCarthy fan, where he's not good in the NFL. And I think he will be, but there's a chance he's not. And what if he is just average or not incredible? Do you want the third option, presumably behind J-Jeff and Addison, for fantasy? Historically speaking, that's not where upside comes from at tight end, unless you just get super lucky with touchdowns. And obviously, we're not going to try to predict that. So, yeah, I think for me, he's fine. But like his name value and perceived kind of upside in this offense, I think is overvalued relative to the actual production you're going to get.
That's 100% the point. And with McCarthy, I use a lot of rookie quarterback statistics. I get it. He's not a rookie. He will be the youngest starting quarterback in the league who's never made a start. So a lot of rookie stuff does apply to him. And rookie quarterbacks over the last decade, their tight ends see a 20% target market share. That's including all the tight ends, not just one. So I feel like if you got more than 20% of a target share, you're asking a lot out of him. And all the elite tight ends, that's what they see. So I'm already banking him on seeing about 17, 18%. He's going to get in the touchdown department this year. I'm not worried about that, but it's just tough to see that funnel in that direction. And you're kind of paying for the name value more so than somebody who's going to be a difference maker. The trade offer that I wrote down is that I bet you can get a late first and something else for TJ Hockenson in a tight end premium league, like a flyer wide receiver, a backup running back that underperformed, like a Trey Benson, those kind of names for in a tight end premium league because people overpay.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to put it. And we've done studies on this too, looking at tight end premium, like does it actually elevate this kind of like tight end 6 to like 10 range? And historically speaking, the perception is that it does, but it doesn't actually provide a ton of value beyond what they normally would, which is kind of why what you're saying, it's like capitalize on this thought process that he has that value and try to really cash in. And, it's not like he's a bad guy to have. It's just that I think there's too much of a emphasis on, I need a starting tight end, so I'll grab Hockenson. But you probably can get similar production for cheaper in a startup or a trade, and that's kind of the point.
Yep. Let's take a quick break, and we'll be right back. All right, let's talk one more category about an undervalued asset in Dynasty. One of the best feelings is when you are looking at your league and you look at other people and you're trying to find trade partners. You're not trying to simply find somebody that you're misaligned, but you're like, I feel like across the board, I feel different than, the rest of the industry, the rest of consensus. And you picked a player that I know we're on board with. I just think he will never, ever be valued the way that he should be.
Well, my friend, what should his value be? As a top 15 Dynasty wide receiver?
He's a top 15 to me. I know he's a top 15 to Jason.
Well, I love that. Yeah, DeVonta Smith is the guy I'm going to talk about because it kind of feels like at this point, recency bias is at play, but also just like a couple years into the league, we've seen major upside from DeVonta Smith. We've seen flashes. He's been awesome at times. We've also seen him kind of disappear at times, most recently this year, where when Saquon is doing his thing and AJ Brown is healthy and is the wide receiver one here, Jalen Hurts is scoring touchdowns from the 1 yard line. Like, it's hard to generate a lot of upside if you're a wide receiver 2 on an offense that is the formula. My point in bringing him up is that I do see a world where that exists again this year and maybe next year, But really, I think the Eagles' offense is going to be much more pass heavy than they were a year ago, just based off game script alone. I'm not saying they're not going to try to run the ball with Saquon, they obviously will. But when you look at how fortunate they were last year to be playing from ahead, basically the entire second half, it really took a ton of volume away from both DeVonta Smith and A.J. Brown. Just for context, last year the Eagles had one of the easiest strength of schedules in the NFL. This year, no team has a bigger delta from easy to most difficult. So just naturally, you should see some more back and forth affairs here for Jalen Hurts to throw the ball in the second half. And if he does, there's going to be a lot more volume for both A.J. Brown and DeVonta Smith. Right now, DeVonta Smith kind of feels like, oh, we've done this for a few years. Like he's kind of like stuck here in this back end wide receiver 2 range where he's fine, but I don't really see the bull case anymore. And for me, like if I think Jalen Hurts is going to drop back more, I want pieces of the Eagles pass game. And so look at DeVonta Smith. He's still 26 years old. I think you can get him for a very reasonable price, but still have him on your roster for the next 2-3 years and give you some really, really, really good production. So for me, DeVonta Smith, I think is undervalued. And whether it's in a startup or via trade, I'm trying to capitalize on that.
Yeah, I don't think people realize because A.J. Brown's there, but he was the first read on he had 32% of the Eagles' first read targets. That is a top 10 mark in the NFL. It's the same as DJ Moore, same as better than Amon-Ra, better than Garrett Wilson, better than Nico Collins, better than CeeDee Lamb. So the way that he is used in the offense is a wide receiver 1. And yet there's somebody else who's seen an even bigger share, but that's how he's being targeted. And you saw what they said they were going to do, which is move him into the slot, and 56% of his snaps were there in the slot. So they actually delivered on the things they were going to do. 2.29 yards per out run is great stuff. He just didn't play a full season. So his end of season stat line from this past year is not going to be, it's not going to do it for a lot of people. And maybe you're one of those people, I never want to pay up for a wide receiver 2. I don't want to pay that price tag, but I don't think you have to pay that at all. Like wide receiver 15 is not what I'm seeing, but I see it with Jason. I see it with some other people. So for instance, do you think people would pay more for Jameson Williams or DeVonta Smith, or about the same?
Tough to say. I think probably about the same, but if I had to lean one way or the other, I would say probably Jameson Williams.
It's right there, and I get the allure of what Jameson could be even more, but I feel like you're tied to a really condensed target share. And I'm looking right now at our projections for Jameson Williams. It's like we have him at like a 19-20% target share, 105-ish targets. It's good. He has to be hyper efficient, has to have the big plays, and has to have the touchdowns, which he can certainly do. But I feel like DeVonta Smith is definitely a player that it's never going to match. So what are you willing to pay? Because I know that you have him in Dino Jr., so you're not going to trade him to me. But would you pay, because you're going to have to pay a first plus.
I think it depends on the league and obviously how high the first is. But a first and a second, a first and a kind of stable veteran player, Michael Pittman in a first, something like that. Like I would definitely be trying to do something like that.
I think you could have coming off, it was the Super Bowl, but I think you could have gotten him in the same range that you got Ekbuka. And just if you wanted to flip that and say, I want a known commodity, and you're with another team that took him and, or that needs to rebuild and like, oh, I can wait around for this player. I think that's the type of like flip-flop if you want to do that, if you want a known commodity. All right, I want to bring up Jordan Love because I feel like he kind of gets forgotten. And I don't know if you feel that way, but when I think of elite dynasty quarterbacks, I want somebody with a play caller I like, who's young and has done it. And I feel like he checks all those boxes, and yet he goes behind so many other quarterbacks that just have not done it at all. Like, let me give you a list of names that are going ahead of Jordan Love in startups. Drake May. I know you love him.
Mm-hmm.
He hasn't done it yet. Caleb Williams. Caleb Williams hasn't done it yet. And yet you're still buying on the potential. He's right there with CJ Stroud. He's back-to-back with JJ McCarthy right now on Keep Trade Cut.
Interesting.
It's interesting because he started off the year really hot last year. He was the QB3 through weeks 1 through 7, hit an 8% TD rate, and then the offense just went run heavy and the touchdowns went super run heavy. So Josh Jacobs, you remember, was awesome from like week 8 on, was like maybe top 5. And the distribution of Green Bay touchdowns 76% of them were passing touchdowns in 2023. Last year, it was all the way down to
55!
they had 23 rushing touchdowns a year after having 10. So what I'm trying to say is that the Green Bay offense that we love and has been top 10 in both years in points per game for Jordan Love, it's skewed towards all the touchdowns going via the run. I think it evens out this year. And I think Jordan Love is one of those guys that is volatile. I'm not saying he's a safe pick at all, but the type of efficiency that he's always been bringing, especially the yards per attempt, is something that I'm chasing if people in your league are not looking for. Like 16.5% of his attempts are deep. And when you look at how he performed while trailing last year, the only quarterback who was better from a completion percentage over expectation last year when trailing was Joe Burrow. He has a lot of like Joe Burrow light characteristics that I like in terms of he's been above 5% touchdown rate each of his last 2 years. And he's starting to offer a little bit more on the ground than I thought he was. Like coming out of Utah State, the dude barely ran in college, and yet he's able to add a little bit on the ground. I think you can add more. So I think Jordan Love is somebody that I would love to acquire this offseason. If people are really worried about the wide receiver room, they're like, I don't know who's the number one. I don't think Jordan Love cares. I don't think Matt LaFleur cares. I think they've kind of sorted it out the last 2 years without it.
Yeah, real quick too, the other thing with Jordan Love that you have to remember and kind of put context around this offense, in week 1 in Brazil against the Eagles, he had the knee injury, so misses a couple games, comes back from that. Then he has the groin injury, which he tried to play through for a few weeks and kind of affected him for like a month, basically. So when you're looking at some of these kind of underlying numbers, you're looking at a player who is probably playing banged up for the first 8 to 10 weeks with those two injuries combined. And you saw a dip in the rushing production as a result. He's never going to be, Lamar, Jane Daniels, obviously, but this is a guy 2 years ago in his first season as a starter, 247 yards and 4 rushing touchdowns. Last year, 83 total yards, 1 touchdown. So we're not projecting Jordan Love to go out and set the world on fire as a runner, but those extra 2 or 3 touchdowns, those extra 200 yards rushing do kind of help add a little bit of floor to this player that does have a high ceiling as a passer. I'm with you on that. If things go well. And like you said, just naturally, and this is kind of what I'm talking about with DeVonta Smith, it's like naturally it's hard for NFL offenses to have such a large portion of their touchdowns go to either the pass or the run, which is why you see guys who have these crazy touchdown rates as passers regress the year after, or vice versa. In Green Bay, it should go a little bit from Josh Jacobs to Jordan Love in the pass game. And so, yeah, I'm with you that right now you don't have to pay these high prices for him. And I'm not saying he'll be a top 5 guy, but like if he's coming off the board somewhere around,
we've seen him do that though.
He did do that a couple years ago. If you get him at, I don't know, this kind of like quarterback 15-ish valuation, roughly where he's at in the market, I don't know. Could Jordan Love be the quarterback 7, quarterback 8, something like that? I think so. So yeah, I'm with you. This is a nice trade target. Still young, 26 years old. And obviously tied to Matt LaFleur, we like that.
Let me give you an offer and tell me if this could get done in your league. Because whenever I give trade offers on the podcast, I know I have people in the back of my like, that would never work in their league, or they have a different valuation, which is fine. This is arbitrary, but in a super flex league, do you feel like you could trade away Caleb Williams and get Jordan Love plus something else?
Oh, definitely. Especially with all the excitement around Chicago and Ben Johnson and Caleb's pedigree, you could definitely, I think, get something else on top.
That to me, like, I get the hype. I get what you're saying, and I get with Ben Johnson. I feel like these players should just be, if you want them to be a coin flip, they're a coin flip, but they're not viewed that way in Dynasty.
No, Caleb's also a little younger, but I mean, a quarterback, 26 years old versus 23 or something, doesn't really mean much to me. It's not like it's a running back who's 29 versus 24. So yeah, if you can get that done, I mean, hey, a little Jordan Love and Jayden Higgins, Kyle, for Caleb Williams. Are you kidding me? Something like that. Now Kyle, I mean, that's Kyle's trade right there. Yeah, I'm always trying to look at like tiering these guys out, whether it's quarterback or another position, and just saying like, is the value for the similar player in this range of this tier higher than somebody else? And can I just get a little something else on top to get a player in the same tier? I would do that every day. And I think that this is one of those good examples of where that could happen.
Yeah, that's all I'm trying to do is acquire somebody that I think he's being valued at 75, 80 cents on the dollar.
Yep.
And I think that's where he's at in a one quarterback league where maybe in your league, nobody cares about quarterback, or maybe they're just holding on to them because they think they're a good asset. I hate it when people lowball me in one quarterback leagues. It's like, I'm not trading my elite asset for beans because you think quarterback's devalued. Like, anyway, could you get him for a second round pick?
In one QB, probably. Like an early second, I think you can get that done.
Okay. I know it's not the sexiest thing because there's wide receivers in the board. You're like, this could be, whatever player you want. That's what it could be. But maybe acquiring a quarterback that's really young, attached to a really good offense for a second round pick is better than your 1 in 7 chance or whatever it is. Like, it feels like in the moment you're passing up something really good when, hey, a sustainable quarterback. Like, I have Jordan Love in a league where he's our QB2 because we have Jayden Daniels, one quarterback. It's like, I could trade away Jordan Love for a second round pick, but it's like, I feel so stable with him and an advantage over the rest of the league, where if Jayden Daniels did get hurt, I feel fine. I feel really good about Jordan Love.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to put it. And yeah, like, he's also a guy that you could get in a trade, just like you're saying, as your QB2 and feel great about that. So I'm with you, man. I think that he's a really good trade target just because the recency bias of injury, Josh Jacobs dominated, all those things. Like, it should kind of swing back in his favor in the touchdown department this year. And I think a top 10 season is definitely doable.
Yeah, later this summer, we're going to be talking about different Superflex tiers. And one of the ways we're going to do it this year is we're going to use the Ballers Dynasty rankings, but Betz and I are also going to separately come up with our own and see where we completely disagree with them and kind of tier out some of these players. I think Jordan Love is going to be one of those guys that I'm going to continue to be bullish on until he proves that he's not an elite fantasy quarterback. I mean, points per game, he's been great.
Yeah.
So that's going to do it for this episode. Betz, sign us off.
Yeah, good episode, man. Always fun to talk some trade at targets. Hopefully corporate is back from their super busy meetings and schedule next week. We'll see. But keep it locked in all summer long. Dynasty Talk. See you then.
Thanks for listening to the Fantasy Footballers Dynasty Podcast. If you want to take your dynasty skills to the next level, check out thefantasyfootballers.com.